Hey everybody, it's Zach here. Welcome back to Clapperboard, where I'll be doing another movie review. This time I'm going to be reviewing Star Wars The Last Jedi. Star Wars The Last Jedi stars Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, John Boyega, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher. It's directed by Rian Johnson, and it revolves around the Resistance who are once again battling the First Order after the events of The Force Awakens. The character of Rian, played by Daisy Ridley, goes to the hideout of Luke Skywalker, played by Mark Hamill, in hoping to allow him to join the Resistance so they can turn the tide of the war. Unfortunately, Luke's views on the Jedi have become disillusioned due to his failings in the past, and he believes that the Jedi should now become extinct. And so it's up to Rey to discover her place in the whole ordeal and see how they can turn the tide of the war before the First Order takes over. Now, Star Wars The Last Jedi, this is obviously the second installment in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which was kicked off in 2015 with The Force Awakens. When this movie came out, I tried my best to avoid all of the reviews and all of the, like Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and all of the reviews and, spoilers that were obviously coming out. I actually stayed off the internet and tried to ignore them completely. All I really knew was that it was getting really, really good reviews. Rave reviews, actually. Some people were even saying it was better than The Empire Strikes Back, which is considered by many people to be the best of the series. And, I watched the movie, and when I came out of the movie, I started doing a bit more research, and I sort of discovered the backlash this movie was getting, like the really hateful backlash that The Last Jedi was getting from the fans, if that's what you want to call them. The Star Wars fans were giving it a lot of grief. And so, to the Star Wars fans, to those fans who did not like this movie, that's cool if you didn't like The Last Jedi, but you're probably not going to like this review. So, if you didn't like The Last Jedi, that's cool. Just probably don't dislike the video, and don't send me hate comments just because I disagree with you. I'll discuss that further on later, but now I'll get into my overall thoughts on the movie. So here's the thing. Star Wars The Last Jedi is not a bad movie by any means. It's not a terrible movie, despite what some people are saying. It's certainly not the worst in the series. It's ultimately a good enough movie to be considered a good or even great Star Wars movie. As a movie, though, it's flawed. There are things in this movie which are problematic and ultimately drags down what could be a really amazing movie. So basically what I'm trying to say is that The Last Jedi is a good movie, but if they had corrected some elements, it would have been much, much better. So I'll kick off with one of the most obvious things that people have been saying about this movie, and that is, as many people know, The Force Awakens was quite heavily criticised, and as the years have gone by, it's got more and more criticised for being too similar to A New Hope, the original Star Wars. A lot of people have been saying that it ripped off the original 1977 Star Wars, which is fair enough. There was a lot of similarities to that movie and A New Hope, and a lot of people were quite nervous that this movie was just going to be a soft rehash of The Empire Strikes Back. And whether you view this as a good thing or a bad thing, I personally view it as quite a good thing. Basically, no, this movie is not a rehash of The Empire Strikes Back. This movie goes in a completely different direction, actually. This movie, it starts off kind of maybe a bit similar to Empire, but then it goes in a completely different direction. And you can tell that the writer and director, Rian Johnson, who, by the way, I think did a mostly really good job with the movie, especially in his, and I'll get onto his direction later, but especially in his direction of the overall world building of the movie. He definitely knows how to make you sort of go like, okay, that just happened, and okay, now we're doing this, and, the movie, it definitely does that, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's up to you, but it definitely yanks you and pulls you in different directions, and there's a lot of twists in the movie, there's a lot of moments which you really don't expect, and ultimately, that does lead to some things which fans weren't really happy about, and I'll get onto that in a minute, but ultimately, if you are expecting to see a remake of Empire, scratch those expectations, because this movie is actually completely different to The Empire Strikes Back, which, in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people's opinions, is probably a good thing. Now, I don't really want to get into spoiler territory here, but if you haven't seen The Last Jedi, I would recommend you watching the movie before you watch this review, because I am going to be giving away a couple of elements. So, again, go watch the movie if you haven't seen it, because I'm about to start talking some spoilers here, right now. Okay, 3, 2, 1, here we go. again, I'm kind of trying not to give away too much, but um, if you were expecting to see a lot of the things that J.J. Abrams set up in The Force Awakens, expect to be disappointed, and a lot of fans were disappointed at this, and this is another reason why the movie got quite a bit of backlash. Yeah, a lot of stuff that The Force Awakens brings up, like the aspect of, who Rey's parents could be, who, the Supreme Leader, General Snoke, is, and all of that sort of stuff. If you're wondering just what those have got to do with the story, again, you're definitely going to have to get rid of those expectations, because, like I said, this movie took a lot of unexpected plot twists, and as a result, and like I said, the movie taking all of those twists was a good thing, but one of the things that this movie does do, and it's not really that great, is honestly a lot of the things that seem to have been set up in The Force Awakens, a movie which I really enjoyed, and actually re-watched a bit of it a couple of days after I saw The Last Jedi. A lot of the things that The Force Awakens set up was kind of ignored in this movie. It feels like, when a lot of people complained about The Force Awakens being too similar to A New Hope, it feels like they thought, okay, now we've got to make this movie 100% totally different to, The Empire Strikes Back. And as a result, they ended up kind of burning a lot of the stuff that The Force Awakens had set up. Like, who the characters' backstories are. Like, General Snoke, okay, again, spoilers, guys, but Snoke is killed in this movie. Snoke is killed by Adam Driver's character, Kylo Ren, who, by the way, is a very interesting character, but Kylo Ren kills Snoke almost at the end of the movie, not quite at the end of the movie, but almost at the end of the movie, like 3/4 of the way through. And what do we know about Snoke? We don't know about his backstory. We don't know who he's kind of related to. There were a lot of fan theories going around between, 2015 and 2016 upon the release of The Force Awakens about who he was. Well, get ready to be disappointed to those people who were expecting that, because Snoke is killed off with no explanation of who he is, what his backstory is. So, yeah. Now, another one of the moments, and this actually took me a while to realise, but another one of the moments which kind of dragged the movie down was actually the side plot with John Boyega's character, Finn, and another character called Rose Tico. I believe that's how you pronounce her name, Rose Tico. These two characters, and Finn was a really promising character in The Force Awakens. He was set up to be a really promising and interesting character. In this movie, he's basically downgraded to this kind of sidekick character, and he basically has this side plot where they need to find, I believe a sort of hacker, and Rose Tico goes along with him, and they sort of develop this kind of romantic interest sort of thing, if that's really what you want to call it. This side plot, not only does it kind of distract from the main messages and themes of the movie, but this side plot is also kind of pointless in some ways. It brings up a lot of interesting ideas, like the idea of, animal abuse and stuff like that. It brings up the idea of, how the war is being used to make money and stuff like that, and there's a lot of interesting ideas that the characters of Finn and Rose bring up. But ultimately, it's kind of a pointless subplot that doesn't really go anywhere, ultimately just leads to a big confrontation near the end, and it's all building up to this moment where Finn is about to, spoilers, sacrifice himself to save the Resistance, and then Rose, who apparently has been building this kind of romantic connection towards him, literally risks her life to try and save him, which, by the way, she could have almost killed him by trying to save him. What is happening is they're flying a ship. Finn is trying to fly a ship into the enemy, the First Order's big destroying machine thing, whatever it was, and then Rose, to save him, she literally smashes her ship into his, knocking it out of the way. She could have just killed him doing that. If you're trying to save him, you might not want to actually put him and yourself in danger. And there's this really cheesy moment where, he's going like, why did you do that? And she says something like, oh, the war is not about trying to destroy those who we hate, it's about trying to save those who we love. And not only is that a very cheesy moment, but, like I said before, but it just kind of came out of nowhere. Like, these characters, they had sort of built up some kind of connection, but it just sort of came out of nowhere. And the subplot, that is ultimately where it was kind of building towards. And, considering that Finn and Rey had set up a connection in the first movie, quite a strong one at that, I don't know if in episode 9 they're going to sort of go with a love triangle angle, although, I'm not too sure about the subplot with Finn and Rose, but hey, it could have been worse, I guess. Now, one of the things I actually did like about The Last Jedi, and this is something that actually a lot of people didn't like about it, that is the humor. A lot of people said the humor in this movie was really distracting. I didn't find it distracting, and it's been quite a few weeks since I watched The Last Jedi. Now that I think about it, maybe the humor did go a bit too far in places, but when I watched it, I didn't find the humor in the movie distracting at all. I actually found quite a bit of it really enjoyable. Again, it's all a matter of opinion, really. I didn't find it as distracting as people said it was, although there were a couple of moments where, yeah, I did think they went a bit too far. Another one of the things that I did actually quite like about The Last Jedi, and this is actually quite an ambitious thing, we know that every Star Wars movie has to have a lightsaber battle. Every Star Wars movie has to have that moment where the heroes and the villains go against, each other in this amazingly choreographed lightsaber fight. You got Obi-Wan and Vader in A New Hope. You have Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace. You had Rey and Finn against Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens. You have to have a big lightsaber battle in a Star Wars movie. Well, I found the lightsaber battle in the Last Jedi, it's kind of hard to call it a lightsaber battle, because it kind of really isn't one. And again, I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but you'll know what I mean if you've seen the movie, or if you see the movie. The big lightsaber battle at the end, if that's what you want to call it, it's not really a proper lightsaber battle. So technically, this movie is the only one in the Star Wars series, apart from Rogue One, which is a spin-off movie. This is the only movie in the 8-movie franchise that doesn't have a proper lightsaber fight, which, again, that's a pretty risky thing to do, but I actually thought that was a pretty creative thing to do. So I didn't mind it, honestly. One of the things that The Last Jedi also did for me was I initially thought that Rey was actually going to turn to the dark side, because Rey, she says in the movie at multiple times, there's always been something inside of me, there's always been something there, and, I'm afraid of it, and that sort of thing. And I thought that Rey was kind of going to be an Anakin Skywalker-like character, where it's kind of like she has the dark side inside of her, and she needs to fight it. And I actually thought they were building up to a moment like that, when, that moment where Luke is trying to train Rey, and, there's that dark pit in the, in that area in the island, and he's just like, you just went into it, in her head, she goes into the dark pit area, which I was supposed to think was like a metaphor for the dark side. I always thought that Rey was sort of going to be kind of like a dangerous character, and she basically has the dark side inside of her, and she needs to fight against it, kind of what Luke and Anakin had to do in the other movies. Again, what this movie really does best is it kind of plays with those sorts of themes, and then just completely pushes them aside and goes with new ones. It's really like, oh, okay, you're going with that, as I said before. That was one of the things the movie did to me. It definitely dispersed a lot of the expectations I had for Rey's character as a Force user. In terms of how The Last Jedi was made technically, this movie has, top-notch production values and departments. Special effects, cinematography, lighting, the designs, everything in this movie is just so well made. I mean, you should see some of the shots in this movie. This movie, from basically beginning to end, is an absolute visual feast for the eyes, and also for the ears. It's a feast for the ears. There were many moments in the movie with the musical score by John Williams, and John Williams, that guy's a legend. I mean, his music in all of the Star Wars movies that he's done, which is pretty much all of them except for Rogue One, that guy can create some seriously amazing musical pieces, and this movie is no exception. The opening battle in this movie, the bass, the way it just echoed throughout the theatre, the bass, the trumpets, everything like that, just incredible. And the movie, I loved how, again, just like Force Awakens and Rogue One, it perfectly balances digital effects with real practical stuff. It's just the perfect combination, and like I said in my Blade Runner 2049 review, this is exactly how I feel like movies of the 21st century, this is how they should look like right now, and they don't, and it's unfortunate, because when you look at movies like The Last Jedi and Blade Runner 2049, those movies blow me away, and not a lot of movies these days, with all of their digital effects, not a lot of movies with big special effects blow people away anymore, and I think we can agree that this is one of those movies where, you know, the visuals are just one of a kind. The acting from pretty much all of the actors, such as the younger actors like Daisy Ridley and John Boyega, to the older actors such as Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, which, by the way, again, like I said in my Rogue One review, rest in peace Carrie Fisher, this is her last movie, so every moment she was on screen, she definitely shone. The acting from pretty much all of the actors was pretty much flawless throughout. There was really no people I could pick apart and say, that performance, I'm not too sure about that. Pretty much everybody's great throughout the whole movie. They look amazing, really look the parts, and especially Mark Hamill. He was brilliant as Luke. I mean, it's amazing to see him back on screen, the dialogue and stuff like that. I mean, he conveys the emotion really well throughout pretty much every scene he's in. Just perfect direction by Rian Johnson, and perfect dialogue written for him as well. Another one of the things I thought The Last Jedi did really well was its world building, its use of creating new planets, new ships, new aliens, new animals, new creatures, new machines. You know, I thought this movie, for the most part, did really well at crafting new places for the characters to go to. And it, again, pushed the new visual interest in the movie, because, as I mentioned before, this movie was just stunning to look at. And now, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, which is the way Luke Skywalker's character was written and portrayed. And as I said before, Mark Hamill, great actor. I really love the way he acted Luke. I love the way he was directed. But ultimately, I think the majority of the backlash this movie has been getting from fans is ultimately down to how Luke Skywalker was written and portrayed as being this kind of down-in-the-dumps, really haunted, scarred character, completely different from the character that we saw at the end of the original trilogy in Return of the Jedi. A lot of people were really unhappy with the way Luke was portrayed in the movie, people saying, oh, it's so out of character for Luke to, you know, have just completely given up. You know, like, some people have actually been writing petitions to get The Last Jedi completely removed from Star Wars canon because of this sort of thing. Because, you know, people just are really not happy about the way Luke has been portrayed, saying, oh, Luke wouldn't be like that in real life, Luke wouldn't do that sort of thing, and just like, look, Star Wars fans, to any of those Star Wars fans who did that sort of thing, and going back to the topic of the backlash, to any Star Wars fans who've just been hating on this movie and saying, oh, it's the worst Star Wars movie ever because they didn't do this and they didn't do these things, and, you know, oh, Luke wasn't supposed to be like that, and oh, we don't know who Snoke is. Like, okay, the movie's not perfect. The movie is not perfect, but if you're saying that it's the worst movie ever, if you're really saying that it's the worst movie ever and it's ruined Star Wars, okay. How about you go to your room, get a tissue, you know, give your nose a wipe, maybe have a bit of a cry, talk to your parents, tell them how you feel, and yeah, I don't know, how about you grow up? It's a movie, for goodness sake. It's a bloody movie, okay? Okay, now that I've got that out of my system, I don't care that Luke was portrayed in that way. I'm sorry, Star Wars fans, but Luke Skywalker, he's a character. He's not a real person. He's a character. And yes, I know that Mark Hamill disagreed with Rian Johnson about the way Luke was portrayed, and a lot of people are saying that, you know, Mark clearly has a lot of disdain for these newer movies. I don't know what to make of that, honestly. Mark recently actually announced on, I believe, Twitter that he actually regrets a lot of what he said about, you know, disagreeing with Rian. You know, because there's always disagreements behind the scenes between an actor and a director. It's normal. It's not like that's a new thing. So, I'm sorry guys, but no, I don't think Luke was portrayed in the wrong way. Keep in mind that about 30 years have passed since the end of Return of the Jedi. I think in that 30 years, a lot of things can change, guys. I think Luke Skywalker can develop as a character, and that's ultimately this message. The message of the movie is getting over failure and picking yourself back up, which is what Luke does. He has a very interesting arc in this movie, and so do many of the other characters. Not all of them, but many of the other characters. So no, I do not have a problem with the way Luke was portrayed. I think it was very well done. Again, Mark Hamill did a fantastic job portraying the character. But overall, I'm fine with the way the characters were portrayed, and I'm fine with the way the Force was portrayed as well. A lot of people have been saying that they didn't like the way the Force was portrayed, with, you know, Leia coming back to life and stuff like that. Like, guys, in every single Star Wars movie, even the original trilogy, they introduced new stuff with the Force. You know, I mean, like the Emperor in Return of the Jedi with the Force lightning. I mean, people don't get angry over that. The prequels with the speed running, you know, in Phantom Menace with the really fast running. People didn't really get any angry at that. I mean, come on, guys. Really? Really? I mean, it's just a movie. Stop being babies. With all that being said, despite the fact that, again, like I said, spoilers, Snoke gets killed, despite that, you know, kind of iffy move that they made, I did think that the big, not the finale, but the big battle between Rey and Snoke and Kylo Ren, and the moment where, again, spoilers, Kylo Ren and Rey eventually do turn against one another, because at that moment it kind of looked like they were going to be allies for a moment, and it looked like Kylo was going to turn to the light side, I actually thought. That was an awesome confrontation. I gotta say, I really like that confrontation. Really well done. Also, before I conclude off this review of the movie, I would also like to shed my thoughts on this year's Solo, A Star Wars Story, which is the next Star Wars movie, and it's meant to be just like Rogue One, a Star Wars story. This is meant to be like a spin-off. Solo, A Star Wars Story, a lot of people have been, like, talking about it and stuff like that, and a lot of people are actually, apparently Disney is actually expecting the movie to bomb. I honestly... That's quite scary that they're expecting a Star Wars movie of all things to flop. But I honestly don't really want to see it. I honestly don't know if I want to see a standalone Han Solo Star Wars movie. I don't think many people do want to see that. So I can sort of see why Disney is expecting Solo, A Star Wars Story to flop, because not a lot of people really wanted to see that. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens this year with that movie. But ultimately, no, I don't really want to see any other Star Wars movies aside from Episode 9. I think after Episode 9, they should really just stop with Star Wars movies and, you know, leave it as is. But hey, Disney, a multi-billion-dollar company, has got a hold of this franchise, so they're just gonna keep on coming and coming and coming and coming and coming and coming and... Ah, well, what are you gonna do? So, overall, yes, I do think Star Wars The Last Jedi is a good movie. Is it a perfect movie? No. Can I sort of understand some of the backlash it's getting? Yes, but it's nowhere near as bad as everybody's saying it is. No, guys, it is a good movie. It's an enjoyable movie. It's not perfect. It made some silly decisions in some places, like obviously downgrading some of the characters like Finn and Phasma and Snoke, and of course some of the decisions to abandon a lot of the stuff that had been set up in The Force Awakens. But overall, due to its visuals, musical score, acting, a lot of the unexpected plot twists, and Mark Hamill's portrayal of Luke, among many other things, yes, Star Wars The Last Jedi is a good movie. I recommend you watching it, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I'll give Star Wars The Last Jedi a 3.5 out of 5. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, as your opinions really mean a lot to me. I'll hopefully see you in another video very soon. Until then though, take care.